Hey, what's up, Canada and beyond? I can't tell you how excited I am today. We've got a special guest today. We're going to get a chance to get one-on-one with Mr. Brad Johnson, who retired as a senior operations officer and chief of station with the CIA Directorate of Operations. He served domestically and abroad with numerous assignments, often during periods of armed conflict. He has served overseas in direct support of the war against terrorism. Mr. Johnson is a certified senior expert in counterintelligence issues with extensive direct experience in the field. He's a senior expert in surveillance and surveillance detection issues. He has proven expertise in dangerous operational environments with the highest levels of training and extensive direct experience in tradecraft for dangerous areas. His proven expertise also extends to denied operational environments, most difficult and restrictive, with the highest levels of training offered anywhere in the USG or the world, and extensive direct experience. Mr. Johnson also managed the overseas portion of the persons indicated for war crimes program and has served overseas as chief of station multiple times. He is an enrolled member of the Cherokee Nation, a federally recognized tribe. Since his retirement from the CIA, Mr. Johnson has run a successful intelligence-related training company. You can see more of Mr. Johnson's work at Americans for Intelligence Reform. Welcome to the show, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to join you.
Wow, that is such an impressive resume, and I got to tell you, with the utmost respect, how grateful the audience here is going to be here today. Canadians very often feel like they're lost in the shadows behind what happens on the global stage, and with what's been going on the last couple of years, there's been a lot of questions that have gone unanswered for a lot of Canadians, and so great, very, very huge thanks for coming on here. I had a brief chance to talk to Mr. Johnson just ahead of the show here, and I told him we're going to kind of bounce him all over the globe and all over the time frame over the last few decades. But start out, if you would, sir, on what you're doing now with yourself and your time. I've been very impressed by following up and doing binging on your work lately.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's just this. There are many items that are open to me to discuss publicly. So it actually started out several years ago, and I was looking around for organizations that have that background with intelligence and national security, especially the operational side. And you can. This is a gross oversimplification, but you can traditionally divide intelligence kind of into two areas. The operational side, which is where I'm from, which is the guys that are out overseas actually doing the espionage and running the cases and doing the work. And you have the analytical side. And that, of course, tends to be more Washington, D.C. based, or in your case, Ontario based, or, it tends to be at the capital where the main seat of federal government is, whereas like I said, the operations stuff is all out overseas. And of course, we're organized much differently than it is in Canada. With the RCMP is the large organization, and intelligence is a division within it. So you almost by nature have less emphasis on the intelligence end of things, at least on the operations side, not in other ways, but on the operations side than does the U.S., since we have our own completely independent a federal agency to do those things. So set up quite differently. But at any rate, coming out of all of that, I looked around and basically, for example, in the United States, somebody who's an actual conservative, which in my mind means somebody who's willing to just say things as they are and talk about the facts and truth and all of that, and can kind of be independent from political driven decisions and that. So somebody who's conservative, which I don't call myself Republican, I call myself a conservative, making a distinct difference. And somebody who's from the operations side, who retired overtly. Most people who are on the operations side ultimately retire covertly, meaning they're not openly retired as CIA. Because I had been a chief of station and worked in different positions where I was interfacing with a lot of foreign countries in true name as CIA, I was one of the few that was able to retire overtly, meaning openly. So I'm retired as CIA, as an open fact, and so you take those combinations of things, and most of the people out of operations aren't willing to speak publicly, which I don't blame them. I mean, there's a price to be paid for being open about all of this and discussing all of this, and certainly I'm a target for a lot of people, and so just most aren't willing to do it. But looked around, saw who was out there willing to do it or had been doing it, and actually what I intended was to join them, but looked around and there wasn't anyone. So I said, screw it, I'll do it myself. So here I sit. That's when I formed Americans for Intelligence Reform. So out of that, part of what I want to do, one of the mainstays of what I'm trying to do, is to get politics out of intelligence. And that is a very serious problem. What we've seen here in the United States is the intelligence community, which is the FBI, CIA, State Department, and the military. A lot of people, 17 agencies are in that intelligence community. But that intelligence community has been consumed and has become a political entity, and they're using those political predilections to try and influence the United States of America. And that, I don't know if that's strictly illegal or not, but whatever it is, I want it gone. And what we've seen is the FBI and NSA and some portions of the military and the CIA have all been used to target President Trump because they don't like him politically. Well, that's political corruption. So those types of things have to go. How the FBI bastardized the FISA process and pretended that they had intelligence out with this Steele dossier in order to spy on the Trump campaign and later President Trump. I mean, that's all illegal. That's what's being investigated by U.S. Attorney John Durham, and we'll see how all that plays out after the election. But there's a lot more than that. That is the dirtiest, worst part that has become open, but it's taking place at all levels. And intelligence needs to be sacrosanct in that sense. It's go out, find what's really going on in the world, report it back, and then it's the politician's problem. We don't get involved. You know, you go out, find out the truth, and if it's going to be that X country is going to attack another country, well, that then is no longer our business until the government decides it's our business. We just report that up and let them decide, whoever the president of the United States is, and Congress in our country make those decisions as to whether they want to interfere, let it happen, whatever. But once you start filtering intelligence through this political prism, you give off something that's not the straight truth. Politicians aren't going to make the right decisions ever because they're not getting the straight skinny, the direct information on what the problems are out there that face us. So that has just got to go because it's going to get people killed. It's already been getting people killed. This politically correct environment in which we live is very dangerous and very, very stupid. It's just all got to go. So that's what I'm working on. It's a horrendous uphill battle because long ago these agencies were taken over by what are leftist activists in these positions, just like we see activist judges. Well, what is an activist judge? An activist judge is somebody that puts his political perspective above the law because he's interpreting it through this prism of his political desires. And that activism is what we now see in intelligence. It is an activist intelligence community. And there's thing after thing I can say, but just to kind of illustrate it, in the United States, every 4 years, just after elections, so the last one came out in January of 2017, which was just following the 2016 elections in November. Another one will be coming out this coming January following this election. And that is a 4-year strategy produced by the intelligence community as an overall document providing guidance, and resources are spent to fall in line with that, because it's part of the planning process is to look out into the future. Where do we need to be placing and spending our resources to adjust to the changing world? Well, if you look at the last one that came out, as I said, in January of 2017, there was more emphasis on global warming than there was on terrorism. I mean, Whiskey Tango Foxtrot, what's wrong with these guys? Even if global warming was not a completely made up, fictitious story made up for political reasons, even if that wasn't the case, that is political. That is not intelligence. Let intelligence do what intelligence does, and take the politics and go do it yourself, and let intelligence just function as they're supposed to function. The other element there that was heavily emphasized was globalization, and that the intelligence community had to be more globalized in order to interface better with the changing world. Well, what is that? You know, the globalist, communist, socialist movement. I mean, our intelligence community has to get in line with that. Well, you know, that just shows how stupid and incompetent and political the leadership is. All of the leadership of all of the agencies are that, and that has to change. So there's a lot of things that can be done, but in addition to all of that we're working on at Americans for Intelligence Reform, there's a lot of other elements out of it. But one of the things is what we're seeing is foreign influence on our politicians. And this is a big, big subject right now. And certainly the precise same problem is taking place in Canada, the United States, and Western Europe. And China is the big culprit. Everyone here in the United States, I don't know if an old TV show that was famous here in the United States many years ago called The Brady Bunch. But in The Brady Bunch, one of the sisters was always going, Marsha, Marsha, Marsha. Here in the United States now, the Democrats are always going, Russia, Russia, Russia. And it's all, you know, anything comes out and it's Russia, Russia, Russia. I mean, and it's asinine conspiracy theory, tinfoil hat, whack nut stuff. But yet that's what the Democratic Party's coming out with. And again, the only people that are out there willing to speak from the operations side that are conservatives that have this background and experience, it boils down to myself and a few others on the analytical side. The vast majority of the people out there, because this having been taken over, are all on this left-wing Democrat Party socialist side. So that's what you hear out there. So it's one of those things where, you know, it's just not enough people like myself out there. Now I get contacted by a lot of people, and 99% of the people say, thank God you're doing it. By the way, here's this information, but don't ever mention my name. And so that's the way of this here, which I understand completely. I mean, there's a lot of threats that come with this and that sort of thing. But, you know, I've been trained for all of that all my life practically. So if anybody's ready, I guess it's me.
As an independent journalist, I can completely relate to that. You know, here's a story. No, you know, but don't mention my name. Don't put me on camera. I don't want to corroborate it. I don't want to deal with it. So we have to try to deal with it and face a backlash for that. And that is, it's an organized punishment for anybody that dares to speak against the narrative and the agenda. That you've hit on so many different things there in your little discussion that we could go on independently on for days about the globalization, the foreign influence. We're experiencing that at such an astronomical level here in Canada, and I think a lot of what we're having to deal with is misguided, misdirected attention. Like you say, Russia, 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 when that is not where we need to be actually looking. In fact, the truth lies elsewhere, and it has a bright red flag and three-digit acronym. And this Canadians are not a stupid people, and we're aware of so much of this, and we're getting lost in the shadows of discussions. Now we've got a so-called prime minister, who's actually the leader of a rogue service corporation that has got 2 Canadians left locked up in a Chinese prison, while
That's
we've
right.
got Huawei 5G executive under 5-star elite house arrest here in Canada, and nothing is being talked about. So we see this fear from our government and this kowtowing of our government, and we're seeing the information that is being passed to China through our government and through the infrastructure that they have created in Canada, giving Canada to China, and this giant unprotected border between the United States and Canada. So we're up here seeing a Chinese communist or UN soldier behind every bush and tree, not a Russian.
Well, and that's accurate. I mean, China's clearly the greater danger than compared to Russia. And I would say the what's important is to view this, or at least to take into consideration and understand the Chinese perspective. For China, they view the world as a single entity, and they want it under their control. And so their strategy and tactics always relate back to that. So I would say that the best description, and this came actually from a Canadian who said this to me, who had been formerly working on intelligence issues in Canada, that what China's doing is they're building themselves an aircraft carrier out of Canada. It's floating, if you will, on land, but it's floating next to the United States and is a perfect platform from which to continue these attacks against the United States. So I think that's clearly what it is, that China intends and is very active and very advanced in their plans to essentially create this aircraft carrier attack base out of Canada. And of course, they want to control Canada and every place else too. So it solves a number of issues from their perspective. And we see just so many things. The West Coast, the BC area of Canada being on the Pacific coast is part of that Pacific Rim where you see the Chinese just really, they view that as their backyard. And so they're very, very active. They're in the United States, it's the same thing too. They're by far the most active in Washington State, which of course borders Canada, Oregon, which is in the middle between Washington State and California. So the West Coast of the United States is only 3 states, mostly California, and then the other half is basically Washington State and Oregon. And the Chinese are extraordinarily active in there. Ask yourself, why have all these huge riots that are unending? I don't know if you get the news on this up there, but there have been riots straight through for 4 months now in Portland, Oregon, every day.
Think
who's funding that?
128 days or 129 days and counting there.
Yeah, exactly. Well, who's funding that? And a lot of that funding is coming out of China. And who is it connected to? Antifa and Black Lives Matter. Now, there are other people's funding as well, but you do not do anything for 128 days that costs a lot of money, because those protesters are paid. They're paid. The materials that they use, people come out and dump out basic weapons, rocks and bricks and frozen water bottles and baseball bats, and they drop them out there for those crowds, and those crowds then use those to riot. You have agitators within the crowds now, and understand that requires training. So you have people that are well trained. Well, where did they get that training? And trust me when I say this, training is expensive. It's expensive because it's just the nature of the beast to go through that. So somebody's been spending a lot of time and money building up this effort that's now playing itself out. And where? On the West Coast. And why? Because it's one of the Pacific Rim areas in which it's easy for China to be effective. Now, don't think for one instant that those riots are not on the menu for Canada, because they are. And there's protests. Yes, there's protests taking place. And the moment that the communists decide, that extreme leftist movement decides that it's time to burn the country down for their own purposes, they're going to do it. So I think Canada and in many ways the United States are ill prepared. We have a huge advantage in the sense that we have President Trump, who's willing to stand up and work against this stuff. Whereas in Canada, with Prime Minister Trudeau, you have somebody who's essentially, And you characterized him earlier as afraid of China, I believe, or fearful, something like that of China, which I think that's true, that's an element of it. But I think it's more than that. I think he's actually friendly to China. I think he wants this relationship with China. And so it's more than just being fearful. I think it's something that he actively is interested in doing, which of course that puts him on a completely different plane with us, the United States, because of President Trump. So I would characterize Canada's situation as more peaceful at the particular moment, but potentially far, far worse. And as these migrants have been coming into Canada, pouring in to a relatively, small country population-wise, not territory, but population-wise, these migrants are forming a large block of people that are going to vote for Trudeau forever, I suppose. So I just see this shaping up where the negative influence, the extreme left socialist movement in Canada is just winning battle after battle after battle. Now, they're winning these elections there. I don't know, are they using mail-in ballots and mark them for you before they get mailed in? I don't know. That seems to be what's happening here today. I don't know, but the problems are shaping up to be quite serious.
The electorate here has been deeply corrupted and damaged under this prime minister. He really altered things. He made it possible so that people could vote multiple times in different regions. He absolutely flooded certain regions. Everything you described in there is absolutely 100% accurate. He is an active player on behalf of China. The general population would probably agree on. And considering now, and this is where it goes to some of the other stories that you've been talking to a little bit and that are coming out down in the States. And this is what ultimately brought you to my attention, was what's happening down there with Joe Biden and China. Now, this is has very deep connections, considering the relationship between our government and China and its past history. There has been hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars transferred between Trudeau's foundations and Clinton's foundations, and this very deeply invested collaboration between these folks. And now paperwork's coming out that thankfully Mr. Trump is forcing out, because the people in control of this information have been rather reluctant to release this. But how's this connected? Can you elaborate? What can you tell us about that, and any updates on that?
Well, first of all, the sort of the basis of the problem is what you're laying out there, and it's this philosophical agreement on what they want. It's the globalization movement, of which they view China as an active partner, I guess would be their view. A stupid way to view China, because China's nobody's partner. They only rule. They don't partner up. So you can just look at these people and go, well, they've got their heads firmly up their rear already. But they're philosophically in alignment. So Trudeau and Hillary Clinton and these exchange of monies, they view themselves as fellow travelers, like-minded, greatly enlightened, brilliant thinkers. They view themselves as this, which, as I pointed out, I mean, nothing could be further from the truth. But they're interested in the money and the power and the influence and the prestige, and they share these goals of how to do it. The Bidens, the Obamas, all of these people, and they form an elite there, of which we also have a problem in that there are Republicans that have bought into that and are also involved. So you have elements of both parties here in the U.S. that don't want this to come out. There's this, in a similar way, is playing out in Canada, where you have a lot of people in power that are making big, serious money out of this, and they don't want to be found out. They don't want the party to ever end. And there's a couple of politicians in the United States through their spouses that have made, $300, $400, $500 million, serious money. Certainly by my standard. I don't know about you, but $400 or $500 million to me is big money. And so that's the kind of money these guys are making out of these deals, and that's done by doing business with China. So it's just this shared philosophical thing, and that's why you see all this interchange. And I would say to everybody, don't think for an instance that just because Hunter Biden, who, and by the way, that pipe that he's with, the viewers are telling me that that's not a crack pipe, that's a meth pipe. So, you know, he's not a crackhead, he's a meth head. So that's an important distinction. So you've got this meth head kid that forgets that he ever had a computer and in his drug haze and leaves it. This guy gets it. So by pure luck, by pure happenstance, we happen to have this little window into these behind the scenes deals where he's negotiating $10 million with the Chinese. These are bribes and payoff, and it's influence operation for bribery. You know, it's now, okay, you want us to do something else? Okay, bribe us again. It's going to be this much. And that's what we saw in Ukraine. That's how they do business. They're all that way. This is that little tiny tip of the iceberg, and the rest of it is floating underneath the surface of the water. And that's that globalist methodology that they're using. They believe, because they believe they're brilliant and they're seeing out into the future the best for all humanity, or whatever it is, that arrogance, they believe they're entitled to these things. So yeah, that's that group of which Trudeau is a player. He's in with that group of people. He views the situation precisely that way. And, you know, really what you have is kind of a, you know, a turd in the punch bowl whose eyebrow falls off every year.
That's one of his eyebrows. I'm told through unconfirmable sources that there's 5 apparently Trudeau's running around there. You never know which one you're going to get. One of them, he has such a distinct gap between his teeth. We've actually nicknamed him Chip. So, but it's these are things that we've been seeing from the grassroots level right from day one of Mr. Trudeau. You're right; both parties are in on this. He is not the one that he's only the current face of this globalist movement right now. And the difference between, I've said this often, between him and the party in power before him is one was flamboyant, one was just a little more presented a little more humbly. And they actually signed Canada into some of these agreements that have created this global expectancy now that Canada has commitments to live up to maintain their global place in this new world order. And I don't think the depths of that have been truly understood by the people until here now, where Trudeau firmly believes that he is doing a righteous thing, taking us, Canada, into being the first post-nation state of the United Nations, ultimately controlled by China and the financiers of the elite narcissists that think that they're entitled to rule the world. And then this leads into so many other nefarious things that we're obviously never going to get a chance to get into today. Where is the next big voice coming from in this fight? Now, we've heard that Trudeau's involved in this. That was the first interview that I saw of yours. And is there an update on these emails? Is there any more evidence coming out that's pointing to our Prime Minister and anyone else?
No, not yet, unfortunately. I'm waiting for that myself very impatiently. And President Trump ordered that these documents be released unredacted. He immediately got pushback from the director of the CIA, Gina Haspel. According to the Federalist, which Federalist is pretty good, they're the ones that have been put together the list of recommended people for the Supreme Court that President Trump has been using, and they've done a pretty good job. So they're reporting that Gina Haspel is personally blocking all of this stuff. Well, since all of this stuff is based on things that are not really intelligence related, I find it unlikely, a low probability, that there's true classified information in these documents that requires redaction. Because a lot of this is based on the Steele dossier, for example, which was a document paid for by Hillary Clinton and just made up document. I could sit in my basement, write up a document, and then pass it out to everybody, and there is no basis for any of that being classified. So to me, it's a strong indicator that Gina Haspel has other motives, not protecting national secrets. And so, of course, she's very tied in to all these same people. And there's a number of things about her that I find worrisome. For example, when she was nominated, Mike Pompeo was the director of the CIA. He moved over to State Department and then suggested Gina Haspel take over as director of the CIA. When that took place, there was a political campaign that was instigated pushing her for that slot. And there was advertising and people coming out for interviews. Well, who organized and paid for that? And why? You know, nobody's ever spent money doing that before. That was a first. So we do political campaigns now for whoever's appointed to the director of the CIA. I mean, I don't like any of that. I just see that whole thing and have to hold my nose because I know there's problems there. And I can't tell you precisely what went wrong, but it would be like a law enforcement officer walking into a room and finding a dead body with 2 bullet holes in the head. You know, you may not know who did it, but you know there's something wrong with that was not a suicide. So this is one of those things. You know, I can't tell you precisely who's guilty of what with this. You know, who did what, but I'm telling you it's wrong. And that campaign that she ran, just that smells to high heaven. So she was a close friend of John Brennan. She traveled with John Brennan to go to John McCain's funeral. All of those are part of this elitist group, of which apparently she now views herself a member. And so is it covering for friends? Is it covering for herself? I think all of those elements of this are the more likely reason for her having stepped in immediately and fighting President Trump tooth and nail on stopping this information from coming out. Now, since that, U.S. Attorney General Barr has said, no, we're not just going to pass all this stuff out. We're going to take a look at it and see what needs to be redacted. Now, I have relative faith in U.S. Attorney General Barr, so I'm hoping that he's going to go through this and only redact the portions that are truly classified that need to be redacted, you know, which is blacked out, in other words. And the problem is that neither he nor these people around him are intelligence professionals. So I don't know that they've got the judgment required to do it, where it would be child's play for somebody like me. They just don't have the expertise. Just like I could not step into his shoes and run, you know, the prosecutions in the United States, because it's not my background. It's the same thing in reverse. He's not an intelligence professional and cannot step into my shoes and know what should be protected and what should not be, because it's not his business. You know, he doesn't know. He's not a professional at it. So I worry about those two aspects. I think we can trust him, but you know, I'm waiting to see these indictments come out from the U.S. Attorney John Durham, which is all the FISA scandal and these abuses that have been used to target President Trump. So I'm waiting to see all of that, which would make my trust in him go, you know, through the ceiling. But also the aspect of who's he having do it? Because if he's bringing over people from the CIA, who's Gina Haspel going to send? You know, if it's people from the FBI, who is FBI Director Christopher Wray going to send? These are not going to be people that want to see the truth come out. These are going to be people that are going to want to protect their own. So I just don't know, but I'm waiting very impatiently to have some of this information start to come out. But you've got elements that control it lined up against it happening. Even though President Trump has ordered it to be done, he could legally. Now, see, here's part of the problem too. President Trump is not a politician. Okay, that's the good news. Bad news is, in some ways, you know, President Trump is not a politician, so he doesn't understand government very well. And as president of the United States, he could have all that stuff printed out for him, all the classified documents printed out for him in plain text, print out 100 copies of it, and go, I hereby declassify all this, and here's a copy for you, here's a copy for you, here's a copy for you. That's legal. He has the authorities under the law to do that. Now, if he ruins something by doing it, then he might get in some trouble over that. There would be some repercussions, but it's one of the things that most people don't realize. But as a chief of station for the CIA, which is the head of an office overseas for the CIA, you have the authority to declassify documents. So, for example, in Canada, the chief of station gets documents that we share with the Canadians, the Canadian service, the RCMP intelligence units. Those documents have to be declassified by our system to be handed over. Now, they're maintained as classified by Canada separately, but that's a classification process that's the Canadian responsibility. But the declassification authorities to allow that to be passed are the chief of station's authorities. So it's something that I've actually worked with a great deal and I'm familiar with. Now, one of the problems for President Trump, who, as I said, huge supporter, I think he's doing a great job, is that he just doesn't have people around him that know that. Most of the people involved in politics, and I find this to be kind of generally true also in Canada, but here, you have the guy who might be old, like President Trump's an older guy, he's in his 70s. A lot of the senators and congressmen are older, in their 60s and 70s. But their staffs tend to be all young. They all tend to be people in their 30s. Well, you need a dastardly old fart like myself somewhere in that mix. So you got the guys that know how all this crap works, who can say, no. You 25-year-olds, just sit back for a moment and let grandpa explain. And this is how you need to play this game. You want to win? Do this. And there's just not enough of that mixed into what Trump's got going on. He's got a lot of young, big supporters, good people, smart, all that, but they haven't lived in the swamp for a few decades like people like myself have. So I would pepper your crew with guys like myself, and I'm not looking to go back in, by the way, but you want to pepper your crew with people like myself who've been around for a long time, who know all the ins and outs, know the tricks, know the dirty tricks, know how administratively to play the game to get done what you want. So it's one of those things. Your initial question is, when are we going to get that stuff? And I don't know. It's just the forces have lined up against it. I hope it's coming out soon. I'm really looking forward to it. There's no question in my mind, at least, that Trudeau is going to be prominently noticed in these documents, and I'm waiting for that. I want to definitely come back and do a special when we get that stuff.
Oh, absolutely. Anytime. There's other things that I don't know if it's just because that's where my chasing the money has led me to, through other things that connect to this whole Biden clan and the Ukraine. Canada's got a deep relationship with the Ukraine that goes back a long ways. And some of when I see the Burisma information dripping out a little bit here, a little bit there, and I see that same corporation having huge holdings and huge influence in Canada. And then we see the connections between Chrystia Freeland and the Ukraine and to the Biden and Clinton side of the fence. These things all beg deeper questions. So this is, I mean, as much as we in Canada care about what's happening with Mr. Trump, we're seeing little slivers of light or cracks in this information that have influence, maybe more so here in Canada to what we're looking at than what is in this maybe being looked at from parties down in the States. I'm pretty sure if I was in any one of those 17 agencies down there, I would be looking at our government in Canada as an enemy, not as an ally at this point. And that's saying that as a deeply disappointed Canadian. Most Canadians, I think, if you walk down the street, would concur with my thoughts on that. So this is, I guess, one of the things that, we've got more than our share of meth heads up here too that forget shit all over the place. But our interest is and how does this? We know it smells very much bad. We know our politicians up here where their interests, their allegiances, their history lies. Chrystia Freeland, I believe, is probably one of the most dangerous people in Canada, and her association with George Soros and her father actually coming across from being her grandfather, was the head of Hitler's printing operation in World War II. So we've got some of these deep-seated connections going generationally having impact in problems that we're seeing exposed today, like in Ukraine. Anything you can shed light on with that, with the Ukraine?
Yeah, let me. You started this off by talking about whether Canada is actually a friend to the United States anymore, and yeah, I mean, I don't. People are people. I know the differences between Canadians and Americans at just the normal person level are kind of minimal. I mean, I understand what you're saying perfectly, even though you speak Canadian and I speak what USian or whatever. And so, there's just a lot of areas that we can get along. I mean, I would say probably Canadians are a little better at picking out the best beers and things like that than the American crowd. At any rate, the government is a different entity from the people.
Yeah.
And certainly this is part of the problem. We're seeing that separate more and more in both Canada, US, and Western Europe. And in Canada, there's been a lot of stuff going on that's badly suppressed informationally, and I think we've seen a lot of examples of it. But I'll just mention a couple. But for example, there's a level 4 lab, I believe it's in Winnipeg, that's the level 4 lab where viral studies have been taking place for decades in Canada. That's part of the network that works with some of the level 4 labs in the United States, and it's there's a little it's a limited group of people that work in that highly specialized area that have the wherewithal. And level 4 labs are not growing on every street corner, so it's limited the number of people that can be involved. Now, what was it, 3 years ago or 4 years ago, the people that were in charge of one of the main elements of investigation of the viral lab in Winnipeg were a Chinese couple from China. And it was a husband and wife. The wife was was the head of the viral department. And as it turns out, she was stealing all that classified information and taking it back periodically to China. And where was she headed? Just take a wild guess. If your guess is Wuhan, you're right. That's where she was going, to the level 4 lab in Wuhan, which is a source, of course.
These are stories we've been covering for the last year, and we get told, "Go put your tinfoil hat on. You're a racist." So it's great to hear you corroborating exactly these things.
Oh yeah, it's absolutely true. I mean, it's absolutely true. And they were what they called it. It's kind of funny to look through the hoops they jump through to what they call this stuff, but they described it as irregularities in handling of classified information. Which that's in the CIA we call that stealing, but in politics call it irregularities. So they were stealing all this stuff, taking it back to Wuhan. Now in the United States, we've had I think 4 different individuals, maybe more, who were caught in the airports stealing samples and data from our level 4 labs on their way back to, again, Wuhan, to the level 4 lab there. And who are all these people doing all this stuff? Who is that? Why is intelligence involved in stealing virus-related information over the last 10 years? Why are they involved in stealing virus information to take back to this lab in Wuhan? Now, it's intelligence stuff. So that's Chinese military intelligence. That's they have various intelligence agencies. All of them are involved in this. Now, in case there's any question, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, these intelligence agencies out of China don't give a whit about cures for viruses. That's not the business intelligence is in. Intelligence is in the business of creating weapons. And if it's a viral weapon, that's the stuff they're working on. They've been stealing this information out of the US and China for at least 10 years and all headed back to Wuhan. So now I'm not suggesting that that's absolute proof that this was a bioweapon that escaped or a bioweapon that was let loose. But what I am saying is anyone who says that there's no evidence of this being a bioweapon is a bald-faced liar. That's an absolute lie. There's clearly evidence, and I just related some to you. They've been stealing, their intelligence has been stealing virus information for at least 10 years out of the United States and Canada to take back to the Wuhan lab. And they, like I said, Chinese intelligence doesn't do cures for viruses. So they may also in Wuhan be investigating that. But for intelligence to be involved, that means it's bioweapon related. Also, in Canada, and this is oddly suppressed too, but a guy, Mr. Ortiz, who's in charge of who's in charge of one of the intelligence platforms within the RCMP, is arrested and for spying for who exactly? China, and for a long time. In the papers that have surfaced so far, it's at least 7 years. Well, now being an intelligence professional, that means that's when they, as soon as they tracked him down, realized that he was the spy. Which, by the way, the information to catch that guy came from the United States, not Canada. Canada wasn't looking. It was forced upon them by the United States. They then figured out who he was in a joint operation, RCMP, FBI. They figured out who the guy was, and they were able to trace back his activities and confirmed that at least the last 7 years he was spying for the Chinese. Now, how long was he spying before them? We don't know. Could have easily been longer. That's only the first time that you have information that lets you pinpoint it, doesn't mean that's when it began. So this guy was in a position, every little bit of Five Eyes information, which I'll mention what that is too, but every single bit of that was shared with the Chinese then, which that's a devastating blow. And why wasn't Canada looking for this? Why weren't they aware? Why weren't they, kind of on their guard against that sort of stuff? Their counter-espionage, clearly failed. Their counter-espionage efforts clearly failed to have such a huge leak. I mean, that's massive. And then Five Eyes too. It's a cooperation that began following World War II between New Zealand, United States, Australia, Canada, and England, UK. And it started out as sharing SIGINT, Signals Collected Intelligence information, and then it has grown since then to share everything. So that guy, every single bit, and Canada does run overseas intelligence operations. They do have reporting sources, all that sort of stuff overseas. Now, I know that's not widely discussed, certainly wouldn't want to provide any details on it, but those things exist. That guy saw every single bit of it, knew everybody involved, knew who was doing what to whom, and he reported it all back to the Chinese. He would have also received some information out of the United States and all those countries I mentioned that are members of the Five Eyes. Some of that was human-based, human espionage-related information. Now, if I start seeing reports of a classified nature that are stolen from the United States of America, and I'm finding out that the Chinese have them, I look through all that, and you can start working backwards to figure out who is the source, which is, essentially how we caught this Ortiz guy in Canada.
Has Canada been doing overseas intelligence operations since the inception of Five Eyes, or do you know? No specific.
Well, I don't know when the intelligence branch or division within the RCMP was created, but they would have gotten involved from the get-go. And one of the things that came out of World War II, and I'm talking about SIGINT, the Signals Collection, was in the Pacific theater of World War II. SIGINT was extraordinarily important, and I would say that the Allies, of which Canada was a part, won the war in the South Pacific much faster and much less painfully because of intelligence. There were a lot of major battles, Battle of Midway and other battles were won based on intelligence. So the Navy particularly, but out of that Pacific theater, recognized just how important that was. And as I said, Canada was a player in all of that. So following World War II, the close allies formed this Five Eyes, and Canada was a player for a reason. So when Five Eyes was formed, Canada had some capability to contribute, or they wouldn't have been included. So I would phrase it that way. Now, when they moved on and how active they've become, but I'm not sure how much I want to get into that sort of stuff for Canada, but they following World War II, recognized how valuable that was and continued to contribute since then, and those efforts have expanded. Now, Canada has not gone to the trouble, I guess, or don't believe it's where they need to spend their time and money to create a separate, say, civilian intelligence organization to go do intelligence operations overseas. Might be budgetary driven. And I actually don't know that much about the Canadian military, but there are going to be intelligence units within the Canadian military as well. So they do somewhat different things. They're looking at order of battle information and so on, but they also have to have them in order to share intelligence with other units. If they're going to be integrated, working with, say, the Americans or NATO countries and things like that, there has to be the capability to integrate intelligence information. So those different platforms and capabilities exist in Canada, and Canada has been active in that arena, if you will, for a very, very long time.
Yeah, and this just helps me get a better sense, I guess, of how big of a role Canada plays in the foreign intelligence industry and within Five Eyes itself. And this leads me back again in my mind thinking two questions. Okay, well, we know that there's a disagreement between the Five Eyes community over Huawei 5G, and we've got their exec under mandated arrest here in Canada, and so I'm just trying to get a sense of how much influence Canada actually has in all of that, and on which side of the fence it's landing, because I don't think it benefits the average Canadian at this point in time, where the way I see the chips starting to fall when it comes to that.
Well, one thing I will say is in Canada, you do not want Huawei to be running 5G in Canada. And that's definitely the way it was headed, with the CFO being held and under U.S. indictment and all of those things pending. Hopefully it won't go forward anyway. But if China runs through Huawei your 5G, Chinese intelligence will be exploiting every aspect of that. And all your private information and communications and medical information, all of those things, all your financial information, all that is going to be accessible by the Chinese. And if they want to put together a profile on you, for example, because they think you're anti-communist and talking bad about communist China, they'll put it together, and they have absolute capability to destroy you through many different methods. And any sort of medical condition that you have that would be embarrassing for whatever reason, I'm not saying you do have that, I'm just saying, hypothetically, any of that sort of information, they'll have access to all of that through 5G, and can use these things to target people. And you're just not going to have secrets from them. They'll also have access to your electrical grid. They want to shut it down to prove a point. It's a push of a button. These things are very dangerous to put in the hands of the Chinese, because they're interested in world domination. That's who and what they are.
Well, that's where Mr. Trudeau giving them permission to put armed forces on the grounds in Canada to protect their assets in Canada is extremely, extremely disturbing. I don't know any particulars on that, how many or where or anything like that. But these are things that we are being hid from Canadians, and likely probably not bragged about to the American intelligence. I'm hoping and praying that their 17 agencies have got a close eye on that, which I'm sure they do, and paying attention to it. And that we're getting on close on the hour mark here. On this whole Chinese discussion, there was a video that you did shared some information on within the last couple of days that's really been circulating and running rapid about Chinese troops on Canadian soil. Share with us the truth about that little video. Now, for the audience, I'm not going to bring up the video and show it. There was a fellow in British Columbia who happened to capture some what appeared to be camouflaged troops jogging down the side of the road training, and this video has been sent to me 10,000 times since then in sheer panic. Tell Canadians what's going on there.
Yeah, I got the video and look at it, and there were. I took a look at the video and was able to I got a very clear copy of it. So I was able to kind of sit and go through it, and you can see that it was probably 2/3 women and they were, everyone says they were marching alongside the road. They weren't. I mean, they were in two columns moving forward in the same direction, sort of thing. But again, 2/3 women, about a third men. They were in camouflaged uniforms, but they look Chinese to me. But the different camouflage patterns used vary, so I wouldn't say that with 100% certainty. And they were clearly almost all Asian. I didn't see anyone that was not Asian in there, Chinese looking in that group. But one of the things I noticed right away is they were not marching. The group was sort of loosely going forward in a very non-military manner. Certain people were, kind of trotting forward to catch up with the hike pace that they were going at, and some were moving back, and they were chatting and doing everything. It was clearly a civilian crowd. You could see that they weren't in particularly good shape. All of those things stood out to me right away. So I was almost immediately concluded that this was not some sort of actual military marching group of people. And then later the reporting came out from a guy in BC that had tracked it down. And this was, I think now forgive me if I get this wrong. I think he called himself like Banana Boat Joe or something along those lines. So if I'm off, I'm sorry to whoever it is I've insulted out in BC. But his reporting on it was that this is this retreat that is organized by a Chinese woman. Now, that Chinese woman, and this is how these things work, is going to definitely have ties back to the Communist Party. This is being done with their blessing, if you will, and being used to their purposes. So those big business contacts, they're all the same going back to China. So this is something that they're trying to use to their advantage. But this is a retreat put on for people who want to learn to be, I don't know. There's been a bunch of programs like that through the years where they're going to be learn to be charming and learn to be successful and learn to make more money and have a positive attitude. And it's one of the retreats that does that sort of thing. So they're putting them through the paces. It's kind of a little bit of a luxury resort that's been converted to this retreat. Now, there was one thing that came out of that reporting that's kind of odd. I mentioned it. It kind of falls into what I call the RUMINT category, which is, I talk about SIGINT, signals intelligence, human intelligence, which is espionage, and then there's RUMINT, which is rumors intelligence. And so it's kind of a rumor more than hard fact that as I see it. But there's the rumors of this Chinese woman that came in and was looking around at this and kind of got suspicious and ended up being hit by a car and taken to the hospital and dying. So there's now some suspicions out in the area by the locals that maybe there's something a lot more nefarious going on here than meets the eye. I would tend to think it's just an accident. The woman did die. I mean, that part's fact, but I would tend to think it's more of a coincidence and an accident rather than that she was murdered, although both scenarios are certainly reasonably possible. Because a retreat of this nature, isn't something where the Chinese need to have this so highly classified that if anybody sees this, what's going on behind the scenes, they have to kill them. So I don't see a motive on the part of the Chinese. This is something that they would be running to gather in contacts with ethnic Chinese people and find out more about them, put together a small dossier on who they are, where they work, all of this. So they build their portfolio of who is available to them in Canada if they choose to contact them or use them in some way. And remember let's note a couple of things about it. China, for the Chinese culture, family is everything. And so it's extraordinarily important to someone who's Chinese. Most of these people have family back in China, and Canada is often used as a springboard to get from Canada into the United States. So there's a lot of things going on of that nature in Canada. At the same time, by Chinese law, it is illegal not to cooperate with Chinese intelligence if you're requested to do so. That's the law. So if a Chinese intelligence agent goes to one of these people in Canada or goes to their mom back in China and says, your daughter in Canada is working for us now, or they go to the daughter in Canada and say, you're working for us now, it's illegal for her to refuse. So by Chinese law. So that means they can take the whole family under the law. I mean, following the law, they can take that person's whole family and execute them, throw them in jail, put them in in these prison camps out with the Uyghurs, whatever they want to do, they can do because they're allowed to punish them by law for refusing to cooperate. So there's tremendous pressure put on these people. And that's something that's actively covered up by pretty much everybody. But even in the United States, you just don't see referral to it because this is one of those things that where you bump into people going, oh, you hate Chinese, you're racist. Well, no, what I'm doing is pointing out how these dastardly communists in China treat their people. And what you're doing is ignoring the cruelty of what these communists do to their own people. And I'm trying to bring that to light versus saying, I hate Chinese or something. But now, should ethnic Chinese with family in China be given a clearance in China? Well, I think you need to look damn close at that. I think we need to look closer at that here in the United States too, because they're under a certain level of pressure that does not exist for many other people. Now, family ties back to some country that's hostile to the United States is always an issue. It's always looked at, but it's something that we see over and over and over and over has been used against us. And the ethnic Chinese living in the United States and Canada are constantly targeted by the Chinese if they have access to something the Chinese want. And like I said, that to me is what this club, this retreat out in I guess it's not too far from Vancouver, but at any rate, out in BC is geared to do. I mean, that's what makes sense from an intelligence perspective. And they may try to, somebody there involved in that is Chinese intelligence. And what they're doing is assessing all of these people, gathering information on all these people to see who they want to target.
Building up the Rolodex, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And
sorry.
Go ahead, please.
One of the things that has become basically the calling card in Canada for their community is that almost all of the resorts and tourist areas in the high profile regions of this country are now owned by people of Chinese descent. So this is where we're now seeing, and it only stands to reason, everybody that has money, power, influence, business people, they frequent these high-end places. This is just a building in the Rolodex, and I think, so this is where that being a resort camp kind of thing kind of rings a little bit of red flag for what might be going on in some of these other places that are basically the entire regions or tourist industry regions have been bought up. So they have complete eyes over the entire region. You go to the most luxurious resorts in Canada and it's Chinese owned almost 100%.
They're using their Belt and Road program in Canada. And that's where they come in and they make loans to build a convention center with attached offices and all of this stuff, and they finance these big projects. Now, for local government, like let's stick with BC since we're picking on them a lot today. Let's take the BC government in Vancouver, right? I assume they're in Vancouver, and they're faced with these Chinese coming to them saying, "Hey, gee, we've got this great development project. We really want to work with you guys. We'll finance it. All your people are going to build it, so it's going to be jobs for all these, Canadians out in the Vancouver area, and we'll build it near the port where we can view all of your government manufacturing, and it's next to where your classified signals are and all this sort of stuff. But we're going to build it right there, and it's going to be this great project." Now, the people in Vancouver, BC, that are in local government out there, they're not briefed into counter-espionage problems and what Chinese intelligence is up to. And that Belt and Road program is used specifically for Chinese intelligence, and it's done through predatory lending. And it's one of those things that's being done worldwide in Africa and Latin America, all around, where they can take advantage of somebody, bring in these development projects that might actually do some good. And so you can just see, say, a mayor out there or someone of that level who has no idea and doesn't care about the politics of the world and espionage and all that stuff. They're not trained in it, don't care about it, just not their thing. And they see big pavilion built here, convention center, businesses coming in year round, all the time, forever, and a whole bunch of jobs for Canadians right now. Yeah, hell yeah, you're financing it? Yeah, where do I sign? And so this is it. They're taking advantage of that. I'll say naivete, but that's a little bit perhaps strong of a word. That's not their job, so you can't really expect them to know everything about it. But the Chinese are doing it. It is a Communist Party initiative. And also, as I said, these loans are predatory in nature. So what they're doing is building all this infrastructure and then later going back in and taking it over because it's not paid for. And so then they become the owners of all of these things and start running it. And that's been used successfully over and over and over. And it's being done out in that area as well. As I said, the Pacific Coast Rim countries and coastlines of different countries is where they're the most active. So that's where you're going to see it first. And it's far away from the seat of government. So it's kind of out of sight. You know, if they were doing it, you know, next to the seat of government in Canada or the United States, it's one of those things that's visible. Everybody sees it. But out there, you know, and if you called the local mayor, like I said, the individual that I was using in the example, if you called a person like that and said, hey, is everything going on, you know, okay? Are there any, you know, Chinese Communist Party attempts to infiltrate you out there? They're going to go, no, you know, we don't have any of that stuff going on. No, we're building a pavilion, but that's innocent. You know, that's going to be their reaction because that's the truth from their perspective. So it's insidious and it's worldwide all the time in every way they can. And they're very successful in Canada. They're successful here in the United States too. I would say the difference is Trump. And in 2018, he gave orders to the FBI to start a huge counter-espionage, counterintelligence program, which they've successfully done. And that's why we're catching all these people. I think that's where this Mr. Ortiz got caught, and that's where a lot of these professors that have been arrested who are working for the Chinese, and people have been fired out of jobs and their clearances pulled. All of that is coming out of that investigation, that initiative by the FBI that started in 2018. So after 2 years, you know, they've got they're up and running and being successful and doing a lot of things. So we're fighting back a little bit more successfully here than up there. But you know, you got to change prime minister.
Well, on that note, last little topic before I let you go for today. This current prime minister has been deeply embroiled in what they call the We scandal the last couple of weeks, and I'm not sure how aware you are of any of this, but he's actually prorogued Parliament for the last, I think, 4 or 5 days consecutively, and it appears that there might be a snap forced election coming up here in Canada to be announced within the next 24, 48 hours. This is going to throw another really big wrench into what's going on between all of the stories, the misdirection, the misinformation. So we've got this. I really don't know where people need to be keeping their eyes peeled to stay in tune of the real story, what might be driving a lot of this, because this We scandal connects to people down there as well. And there is something extremely drastic. I'm not sure. Are you aware of what's going on with that at all, Brad?
No, I haven't heard about this one.
No. Oh, well, it's going to be, we're going to start on our own roller coaster up here, or well, it's been going on for a while, but it's $1 billion, another, again, money being stolen, lots going on. Another whole other story, but this is going to create an interesting time in the media between our media up here, which has been bought and paid for by the Prime Minister's office, yes, and is on a hate mission for Orange Man Bad. You know, they have this complete ridiculous complex going on in the media up here, and now they're going to be struck with a new election. So we're going to do everything we can up here to keep pumping your truth down there and exposing what's been going on. Whatever you release out there, we'll make sure that it goes far and wide up here, because the big splash down there always means a lot of ripples through Canada, and it can't be avoided.
Yeah, looking forward to it. I do get up to Canada quite regularly too. I've been up to kind of a number of conventions to sort of discuss this on the grassroots level, and I've talked to a number of organizations up there. So very happy to participate. I'm not sure how much longer the authorities will let me through the border, but as long as I don't get arrested and deported from Canada, I'll keep coming.
Well, you must be doing something right. I hear you've been deplatformed on some of the social media platforms.
I get attacked all the time on different things. Yeah, and I'm throttled. Mainly they throttle my material and don't like it to get a very wide audience out there of people. So I mean, I've used different tactics. One of the things, you develop a lot of friends by doing this, as people see, I've been doing this now for 2 years or more, no, almost 3. So it's long term. There's no question of who and what I am. So you begin to develop allies. So I've had a lot of friends kind of help me move my material out. So I'm relatively decentralized now on purpose, so that my information gets spread out into a lot of different places. So I mean, to stop everything, you'd have to go out and shut down like 50 sites, which that would require, I think, a little bit more of this, and they're prepared to throw at the problem. So far doing okay.
So where is the best place for people to stay tuned to what you've got going on?
Yes, the best place would be to go to my website. So please check out intelreform.org. I am under Americans for Intelligence Reform, Brad Johnson, CIA, those things. You can find me on Facebook. They haven't kicked me off yet. I'm on Twitter. They haven't kicked me off yet, although both of those are pretty badly throttled. My stuff doesn't get a very widespread. I'm still amazingly on YouTube, although they suppress my numbers there too. But I've also joined Parler, so I'm putting some stuff out on Parler too under Intel Reform. So that's the way to find me on those social media outlets. And I'm other places too, Tumblr and different places, but nobody goes to those sites. I try to put it out everywhere I can. BitChute, BitTube, YouTube, but the best is the website intelreform.org.
Well, we'll put that out there. Again, I got through maybe about a third of the questions that I wanted to take you on a roller coaster ride through. So I hope really sincerely that you'll come back and join us again sometime soon.
Love to. Yeah, anytime. And hello to all my friends in Canada.
This message will go far and wide. We'll send you a copy. You can do with it anything you choose. But we do get some really good support from the grassroots. We're small, but we are mighty, and we are the real Canadians. We are not represented by this rogue service corporation, and we got your back up here. So.
Well, the feeling's mutual, and I certainly am looking forward to doing anything I can help, especially if you've got actually elections coming up. I'm definitely going to be reaching out to the grassroots organizations in Canada and hoping to come up and do whatever I can do to support.
Well, like yourself, over the last couple of years and taking all of the hits that we do take, we were pretty seated everywhere else and networked and across the board with the people that are pushing back, that understand that when tyranny becomes law, resistance becomes duty. It's a lot stronger movement up here pushing back, but it's also such a smaller population. Hugely spread out, Trudeau doesn't just have one blanket over our voices. He's got a stack of wet blankets over top of us, silencing us. But the truth is coming out, and it's through diligent people that aren't afraid and will not back down, will not surrender. And you, sir, are one of those few, and that is what makes you in such high demand, because as you said, there's not a lot of people that walk through the daily world with your tradecraft and let their face be known. So that's deeply appreciated, and I understand the value of that a lot. Thank you so much for your time today. We could go on for hours like this, but it ends up getting watch them because they're too long. So maybe we'll get them together again and do it again soon. And I again, and I'll add a link later on in the chat here. I caught your interview last night on the McFiles. That was a lot of fun to watch. It gave me a great sense of who you were outside of some of the other interviews. So I'll add a link for the crew to catch that later on. So you'll be getting a lot of support from Canadians over the next coming days. And maybe, who knows, maybe we'll set up something weekly between Canada and the US, because there's a lot of stories. We all walk in the same footsteps. So
yes, we do. Yeah, I agree.
Well, appreciate your time, sir. You have yourself a great afternoon, and we'll get off here and let the folks carry on with their day.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Look forward to speaking to you again.
My pleasure. Bye for now. Okay, guys, that was one of the most amazing hour and 15-minute conversations I've had in a very long time. I hope you guys share this out far and wide. We only got to a small fraction of the questions that I really wanted to get to, but I hope it created a lot more conversation and maybe answered a few questions and give folks a place to start looking for their own answers. So on that note, I love you all. Stay Canadian, keep fighting, and let's make Canada Canada again. Bye for now.